Hello friends! Are you going through a divorce or even thinking about filing? Well, if you are, you need to know a little something about what's called a status quo or standing order. Because the minute that somebody says, hey, I want to get a divorce, the payments of rent, credit cards, and children's expenses, well, it could get a little bit messy. So on today's video, I am going to break down what these status quo or standing court orders are. I'm going to talk about the top 5 payments that are usually stopped abruptly as soon as a divorce case is open, and most importantly, what to do if a spouse stops paying these day-to-day expenses, how to enforce these status quo or standing orders. Welcome back to the Divorce Broadcast. My name is Manny Segarra, coming to you from Miami, Florida. All right, so what exactly are these status quo or standing orders? Well, in many divorce cases, especially throughout the different jurisdictions in Florida, the courts will issue automatic orders once a divorce case is filed. These are temporary injunctions or temporary orders meant to preserve the status quo, meaning everything financially and or with the children must remain the same until further court order. These status quo orders or these standing orders, they protect both spouses and the children from financial hardship and sometimes gamesmanship. For example, it prevents one party from draining the party's joint bank accounts, or cutting off the other spouse from health insurance coverage, or pulling the children out of school. These are all very important temporary measures that a court will enter into effect to try to preserve the finances of the parties and make sure that each party is continuing to pay their fair share of what they were paying prior to the initiation of the divorce case. Some samples that a status quo or a standing court order may require in order of maintaining the same throughout the proceedings are the payment of the mortgage or the rent or the household bills, maintaining the children's expenses either after school, extracurricular activities, or if they have some sort of tutoring or enrichment, not selling or hiding marital assets from the other spouse, making sure that health insurance, car insurance, and things of that nature continue to be paid, avoiding harassment or threats of cutting off the power or utilities in order to gain an upper hand. These are all examples of things that are sometimes covered in these status quo or standing court orders. Remember, these orders are not meant to punish or bully anyone. What they're meant to do is to create an equal or even playing field when the parties are both dealing with a divorce. Now, let's talk about the 5 most common payments that tend to mysteriously stop when a divorce case is filed. And here's a little bit of a spoiler alert. Whenever these payments stop, they can wreak serious havoc on the other spouse if they're not ready for it. The first payment, and probably the most common one that all of a sudden stops being made after divorce is filed, is the contributions towards the rent or mortgage of the marital residence. I know, big surprise. What ends up happening is one of the spouses moves out, and when that spouse moves out of the marital residence, they all of a sudden stop contributing or paying the rent or the mortgage at the marital residence. Not a good move, because the court will expect that if this expense was shared while the couple was married, then both parties need to contribute towards the rent and the mortgage while the case is pending. I always tell clients who are thinking about moving out of the marital residence, think long and hard about it, because you're going to have to pay the new rent for the new place that you're going to live in and still contribute to the rent or the mortgage at the marital residence. So that's 2 households that will have to be financed while the case is pending. So make sure this is the move that you want to do. Number 2, and up next, is an unfortunate one, and that is all the childcare and school-related expenses of the minor children. Whether it's daycare, tuition, or after-school programs, including extracurricular activities, It is very unfortunate when one spouse decides to abruptly stop paying their share of these expenses, and it causes a disruption, sadly, for both the children and the parent who lives with the children the majority of the time. Number 3, and I've seen it many times, and that's when one spouse cuts off the medical care or medical insurance of the other spouses, especially when they try to do it in a quiet or sneaky way. Newsflash, in most cases, this is a direct violation of a status quo or standing order, and when a court finds out about it, the court is going to frown upon this type of conduct, especially if the spouse that gets cut off has either a long-term illness or some sort of serious medical condition. The 4th group of payments that is oftentimes stopped during a divorce proceeding is when one of the spouses stops contributing to either utilities or household expenses. Remember that the light, water, cable, and internet, they do not stop just because a person is going through a divorce. And a lot of times, the spouse who stops making these payments may use this as a leverage tactic, and it is very unfortunate to see that, and the courts don't like it either. The 5th and final payment that we'll discuss on the video today is the payment towards the car or the car insurance. What happens is that one spouse all of a sudden stops paying for the other spouse's either car payment, the car lease, or the car finance payment, or the car insurance. And then this in turn leaves that other spouse stuck without the use of a car, so they can't either get to work or pick up the kids. If the car payments were traditionally paid by both parties during the intact marriage, well, the court is going to order both spouses to continue to make contributions or jointly pay for that cars in most circumstances. Now that we've covered the 5 most common payments that mysteriously stop when a divorce case is filed, remember that these aren't just financial annoyances. A lot of times when one spouse stops or ceases making these payments, it's about pressure tactics. It's about trying to influence a better result from the other spouse. Now, remember, courts are trained in this. Courts recognize this type of behavior, and the spouse who is suffering through this financial harm does have remedies that we will talk about now. Now let's talk about some of the steps that a person can take in order to enforce the status quo or standing orders. Well, step number 1 is to document everything. They must create a paper trail of either text messages, emails, or missed bills that were not paid, and proof that they had reached out to the other spouse asking for their help or asking for that payment. This is something very important, and it bleeds into step number 2, which is talk to your attorney right away. Talk to them right now. Essentially, your lawyer can consider whether to file a motion for contempt or a motion for enforcement of the status quo or standing orders. They will need all of that evidence that was gathered from step number 1, so that when they go to a hearing on this matter, they can show the court that that spouse that is no longer paying had previously contributed to these expenses. And if the judge finds out that that spouse has violated its status quo or standing order, the court is going to be very upset, and the court can order repayment of that person's 1/2 share, whatever portion of the share is that they had contributed previously. They can order sanctions, they can impose attorney's fees, and even order temporary relief in the manner of monetary payments. Speaking of temporary relief, step number 3 is considering filing a motion for temporary relief from the court, either through counsel or if the person is representing themselves. This allows the court to step in and try to address orders on a temporary basis, orders such as child support or for mortgage payments or temporary alimony. As I mentioned previously, the courts are willing to help. They just got to know what's happening, and judges move a lot faster when children are involved and essential bills are not being paid. If the power was cut off and there's 3 kids in the home, it may be an urgent motion filed with the court, and the court may step in to grant the relief that that person is seeking. Finally, step number 4, that person who is no longer receiving the payments must be prepared to go to court. In the hearing, they will have to show that that spouse had been previously contributing to the expenses. So an example is the rent. The spouse had previously been contributing to the rent. All of a sudden, that spouse stopped paying the rent and it is causing financial harm or hardship. In the scenario with the rent, we would have to show messages to that spouse who's no longer contributing saying, hey, you used to pay the rent, you're no longer paying it, we need it, it's due on the first of the month, you know the kids are here. A message, an email, or a text. They would show bank accounts of these previous payments from that particular spouse, and all of a sudden the spouse stopped from the date of filing the divorce to the date of the hearing. And because of that, the person who is suffering the harm or the financial harm would show that they're about to get evicted or that they have to borrow funds from family and friends in order to be there. These are examples of how to be prepared for court, because when the time comes, if all the other steps were followed, this person would be in a great position to try to show the court that the other spouse is being derelict on their duty to help contribute and continue contributing to the status quo payments. Very well, before we wrap up this video on the importance of status quo orders or standing orders, especially when it comes to the financial contributions of both parties while the case is pending. What is the key takeaway of this video? Well, I submit to all of you, it is don't wait. Remember, courts are here to help, but only if the person speaks up for themselves. And if you're watching this video because you find yourself in a similar situation, maybe your spouse stopped paying for extracurricular activities for the children or cut you off from your insurance, or you're sitting in the dark right now because the power is out of your house, well, make sure you're surrounded by the right team that knows how to navigate the legalities of this and get you in front of a court as soon as possible, because these issues can snowball quickly and they can have a huge financial impact and cause significant hardship if they're not addressed. All right, that's a wrap on our video for status quo orders or standing orders. If you know anyone that might find this information useful, have them look us up at www.segarralawfirm.com. We have offices in Miami and Orlando, Florida. Se habla español. Please do us a favor and like this video. Drop a comment below and subscribe to the Divorce Broadcast. Be safe and we'll see you soon. Thank you.